Can we remember to please mute microphones? I think someone's microphone is on. Thank
So
you.
we have like two. The first one is scaling preparedness, which builds the ability of actors and stakeholders basically to catalyze and sustain innovations, and it helps us to facilitate co-design of the
Hi, Sadia, how are you?
Yeah, hi, Jose.
Are we the only ones here?
Not sure
No.
why. No,
No,
yeah,
we have
the other people.
Mr. Zenawi and we have Muhammad as well. Good.
Yes, so we're waiting for, I think we do have other participants on as well.
Yeah, we
I'm
have
seeing
Tusnaim, I
attendees
see
here.
Sandy, or Michelle is here. Perfect.
Yeah,
Hi,
so
Jose.
I
Hi.
see 7 other attendees at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we start?
Maybe if you want to give some 3 minutes, let's
Okay,
have it.
perfect.
Yeah.
I think maybe we should get started. What do you think, Sadia?
Yes, I think we can start. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Sadia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the FLEX, the Frontline Learning Exchange webinar series. And it is wonderful to have you with us today as we continue our journey of bringing voices from science, practice, and policy to explore solutions for some of the world's most fragile settings. My name is Muhammad Khalifa. I am a regional researcher on integrated modeling and assessment at the International Water Management Institute, IMI, and I will be your host in today's webinar. FLEX, the Frontline Learning webinar series, is about sharing critical knowledge on climate resilience in fragile and conflict-affected settings. It provides a trusted space for learning, collaboration, and collective action to benefit fragile communities. And at its core, FLEX is about taking science to the most difficult places where it's often needed the most. This initiative is led by the International Water Management Institute under the CGR Food Frontiers and Security Science Program in partnership with the Anticipatory Action Hub and the Environment and Humanitarian Action Network. And our mission is to accelerate learning and action by connecting science, practice, and policy. And to this end, we run the FLEX series of webinars and touch on the critical and diverse on critical and diverse topics ranging from anticipatory action, climate smart and locally led solutions and scaling innovations, to digital and smart approaches, prevention of environmental harm in humanitarian action, and water cooperation as a bridge for peace in fragile contexts. Today, Flix is hosting a timely and important conversation on the role of gray and green infrastructure in building resilience in fragile urban communities and displacement setting landscapes. And we will be discussing how these approaches can complement each other, the trade-offs they present, the governance challenge involved, and most importantly, the need for inclusive, climate-smart solutions that put communities at the center. This webinar promises to be a thought-provoking exchange, and we are excited to learn from our distinguished panel and from your contribution throughout the session. As an introduction to today's session, we know that urban areas everywhere are facing complex challenges, but these challenges become even more intense and complex in fragile, informal, and displacement settings where basic infrastructure is often missing or overstretched. Communities in these contexts deal with flooding and poor drainage, heat stress and lack of cooling, water scarcity, waste mismanagement, pollution, and food insecurity, and in some cases, many at the same time, and often without knowledge and resources to respond. And here comes the critical question: which climate smart solution work best and under which conditions? As we think about how to address these complex challenges, we can group solutions into three main categories. The first is green solutions. These are nature-based approaches like wetlands, rainwater harvesting, rain gardens, and urban forests that use natural processes to manage water, reduce floods, and cool cities. The second is gray solutions. These are more traditional engineered systems, such as dams, stormwater drains, and treatment plants, which rely on concrete and technology. And finally, there is hybrid infrastructure, which combines the best of both options. For example, flood levees paired with mangrove restoration or stormwater drains that connect with urban green corridors. This mix of options that we have gives us a spectrum of solutions we can adapt to different fragile and displacement settings. But the key question is which type of solution works better in which context? And just as important, what enabling environment is needed for their adoption and scaling. Our distinguished speakers will guide us through successful cases from different countries. We are delighted to be joined by an excellent panel of speakers, each bringing unique perspectives and experiences from fragile urban contexts and displacement settings. We have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Engineer Tasneem Jaffer, architect and urban manager from Sudan. Welcome, Tasneem. Dr. Zinawi Zerihon, assistant professor at Mekelle University in Ethiopia. Welcome, Dr. Zinawi. And Dr. Mitchell Maktaf, project lead of Wiqaya project at IWMI, the International Water Management Institute. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell. And last but not least, we are honored to have Dr. Sandra Roxel, research group lead for fragility, conflict, livelihood, and water research group at IWMI, who will provide a few minutes of closing remarks. During the session, we will also have a live poll with a few questions to our audience and Q&A segments. So we encourage all of you to participate actively by putting your questions and comments and reflections in the chat box. Our first speaker, Engineer Tasneem Jaffer, will take us to Al Ubaid city in Western Sudan, sharing insights from the experience of people there in securing water and food while under siege. So, Engineer Tasneem, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you for having me on the webinar. And hello, everyone. I see all the speakers are doctors, so I'm a practitioner, so maybe my perspective is going to be a bit different.
Would you like to share your screen?
Yeah,
Okay,
can you
thank you.
see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Tasneem Jaffer. I'm an architect and an urban manager. I specialize in land governance. And I'm going to share some insights from a project that we did, from a training actually that we did in Al Ubaid 2 months ago. And this training that we provided led to the research that I'm talking about now. So this is the research is in its very early stages, but I thought that sharing some ideas or some outputs from what we've gained right now might be useful. So Sudan is a country in northeast Africa. It used to be the largest country in Africa, and Lubayid is the capital of North Kordofan, and North Kordofan is right west of Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. Lubayid is considered a strategic city in the country, Sudan, because of its location. So it is in the intersection of several roads. It's considered the entryway towards Western Sudan, so towards the Darfur region and also Southern Sudan. And so that's why during the war, when the war started, it was under a lot of attack and it's still under shelling right now. And it is also a huge marketplace. So there isn't a lot of agriculture in the city. There isn't a lot of products within the city itself, but it is considered a huge market for the region itself and for the state of North Kordofan. And what happened in Al Ubaid is that when the war broke in April 2023, it became under a very close-knit siege. So the city was blocked from the rest of the country. So they weren't able to bring in any supplies. Very limited supplies came into the city. People were not able to leave or come back into the city. So this was a huge issue. And this continued for almost 2 years. So you can see here all of the entryways to the city were blocked and the exits from the city also. And this automatically reflected on the city itself. So all of the main water sources for the city are outside Al Ubaid. So they use mainly water harvesting. It's a semi-desert area, so it's pretty dry, but it does have a lot of rain between June and September. But other than that, they don't have a lot of water wells within the city. So all of the water sources were cut off from the city itself. And the agricultural land is also on the periphery of the city, so it was also blocked from the city. So there was a food shortage issue. And like I said, they weren't able to bring a lot of produce from outside of Al Ubaid itself. And even though Al Ubaid was uh, under attack at that time, it was still considered to a largest extent a safe space for the villages around Al Ubaid. So it is a hosting community for refugee or for IDPs from other smaller villages that are in the area in the Kordofan area. So looking at how nature-based solutions really helped enhance resilience in Al Ubaid as a hosting community. First of all, I think re-envisioning existing resources. So the people or the community itself, they had to think outside the box and try to innovate in terms of how they're going to solve the different issues that they were facing. So one of the main vulnerabilities that, like I said, showed during this time was that all of the food sources were outside the city and all of the water sources were outside the city. So they had to look at the sources that they have. And in these sources, they looked at, first of all, land and public space. So public spaces that they used to have, because of the rain, they used to have small ponds and lakes and water concentrations that would show up during the summer season or during the rainy season, but they changed the land use in a lot of places. So they either use them as parks or recreational spaces or as housing. So this siege highlighted this specific vulnerability, and they had to start rethinking how they use public spaces. And they also, so one of the few spaces that remained was Al Fula. And Al Fula is a large water catchment area that used to be a dump area, but it also collected water. It collected water, but it was neglected for a long time. And then bit by bit, they started transforming the land around it into agricultural land. So distributing the land around Al Fula and utilizing the water from Al Fula really helped with the water issue and also with the food supply. So the plots around Al Fula started providing vegetables and also nurseries, so you can buy small plants from these areas and take them and plant them somewhere else. And there were also small fish farms that started showing up, and all of this helped support food within the city itself. And the Fula water itself was used for animals for drinking water and cleaning houses and everything. So this was very useful for them during that time. These are some photos of the plots around the Fula and how they've been used. And these have been extended more during the siege. So it was something that they started to do, but it wasn't very there weren't a lot of farms, but then during the siege they expanded a lot. So this is one of the water harvesting plots that used to be there until 2003, and then it turned into a park, and the park itself isn't designed for water harvesting. So this is a space that they need to consider like reusing and adapting now for the new situation. The other thing is that they use nature-based solutions as tools to transform these challenges into opportunities. So like I said, a lot of the water and the culture itself. So people think of water harvesting as something that occurs outside the city, as something that is more of a rural practice. So even though Lubayd always had a challenge with water, hardly anyone thought about water harvesting in houses within the city itself. So this is something that had to change during the siege. So people started building purchasing, for example, water tanks, and building underground water tanks in their houses. And this is something that is becoming more common practice even after the siege has ended. So people started thinking of okay, we need to do water collection at the household level. And this was very useful where the problem was distributed throughout the community and throughout the households, and they were able to solve a huge water shortage for at least 4 or 5 months during the rainy season. Like I said, this is becoming more common practice, even though it wasn't there before. So people relied on taps and the main water system. The third thing is that MBS really provided a good base for collaboration between the communities and the local government, because during the time of conflict, one of the good things I think that come out of this is that the priorities of the community and the government are aligned together. So both of them are facing the same problems. So both of them are trying their best to solve these problems. And that's why while they're working together, they start to collaborate more and to find better solutions. And two of the examples for this is that some of the community members households started small community gardens within the neighborhood. So they would start planting in empty plots or in parts their houses themselves inside the yards, and then they start trading together with each other the produce. So this was highlighted by the local government, and they rescaled this concept in different neighborhoods. So they took the idea and rescaled it. So we can see how this started as just something, one person who wants to solve their own problem, and then because of the need in that time, the government helped in rescaling this type of effort. And also there's a lot of deforestation during the siege. A lot of trees have been cut down within the city. Even some very old trees have been cut down because of the lack of fuel and lack of gas, and there was no other solution for the people. So they had to start cutting trees. And this was also an issue for both the people. So the people of Al Ubayd themselves also see this as a big problem. But they understand that why this is happening. So as soon as the siege broke, they have this celebration that they do every year called the Day of the Tree, where they celebrate gardening and they celebrate planting trees and everything. And it's something that they work together also on bringing back this year. And the government aim to plant 130,000 trees and help using not only households but also school children. So this is also another way of collaboration and solving the issues that happened during the siege time. So this is an example of one of the community gardens. This is the owner of the garden, and like I said, they have a lot of diverse produce that they were able to farm during the siege. And so for the last question, what should drive climate adaptation? So I'm just going to give a quick maybe comparison from the specific Ubayd case on how MBS differs from infrastructure-driven planning. So MBS, from what I've seen, is much more flexible in terms of it can be deployed very fast during very challenging settings, like the setting of Ubayd. It doesn't take a lot of planning. It just can, it's a very bottom-up approach. It can be done top-down, so it has the flexibility of both sides, but it can be deployed, like I said, very fast. And it can be formal or informal. So it can be led by the government, but it can also be led by households, for example, or by even school children. And it's also a very useful tool to capture the local knowledge. So what people think and so you can gain a lot of ideas from people and start, like the case of Al-Ubayd itself, rescaling it through government. The infrastructure-driven planning is usually more top-down. So it might need a lot of budgets and resources that might not always be available in times of conflict. In times of conflict, we've seen a lot of systems break down, a lot of cities, the governance system itself breaks down. So there isn't any time or any resources available for long-term planning or for even financial resources for being able to adapt very fast. And so that might be one of the challenges, but it can also help, like I said, scale the MBS efforts. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't run over time.
Thank you so much, Engineer Tasneem. This is a very interesting case, and thank you for sharing this experience with us and with our audience. It is really difficult to see people suffering like this to get their basic needs, water and food. But what is coming out of the necessity here is very, very interesting and promising. You mentioned foster collaboration and long-term solutions for resilience. And this is at least a hope that's coming out of the suffering of people. So thank you so much again. Our next speaker is Dr. Zinawi Zerifan, who will share experience from the neighboring country to Sudan, Ethiopia, from Tigray region on nature-based solutions and infrastructure-driven approaches to resilience. So over to you, Dr. Zerifan.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. So my approach will be, I think I should first present the debate between nature-based and infrastructure-driven approaches, and then I will go into the specific of the study we conducted back in Ethiopia, in Tigray. Well, I think in the literature, as we all know, both nature-based and infrastructure-driven are being treated or at least presented differently, while in reality it's very difficult to distinguish one from the other because we cannot think of ecosystem-based resilience without the basic structures in place. So that's something that we need to think about. So we cannot differentiate one from the other. That's what I think has to be reconsidered. And the other thing is, I think the fact that they better serve the communities when they are combined, when they are integrated, than when they are independently treated is seen in the example that I presented here, where a flood-prone might use embankments. Of course, the embankments are not clearly marked here, alongside restored wetlands. So this clearly indicates that when they are combined, I think there is a possibility of providing better services for the communities in need. It's also important to look at why combining both of them, or looking at as one combined solutions is better, especially in the context in a post-conflict context, is very important. One, I think in a post-conflict situation, as we all know, basic services are usually destroyed, and communities will be in trouble, as Dr. Tasmin has been explaining. So it's quite a challenge in this environment. So the great infrastructure is essentially essential for water, sanitation, electricity, without which people will face a lot of challenge. So I think from this perspective, looking at a combined effect of both nature-based and infrastructure-driven approach is more effective than otherwise. So I think we have to look in terms of the combined effect of the two, rather than considering one approach alone. Similarly, we can think of the combined effect in terms of climate and disaster resilience, where we can think of green infrastructure providing its support to mitigate flood risks and stabilize degraded land. And we also can consider it for livelihood and local economies, for job creation, and for market access and mobility. So it's when the two are combined that we can provide better services, especially in contexts where these infrastructure-based resources are compromised. So that's something that we have to consider. Now, coming to our study. Our study specifically was on vulnerabilities of host communities in Megale town in Tigray, Ethiopia. And the context was there was a severe conflict, and the whole region was, like Engineer Tasmin has indicated, it was on blockade and siege. Banks were closed. People in the city were not able to access their accounts. Markets were closed, or the roads leading to the city were blocked. So it was a very difficult situation in the city. And on top of all this, people from other neighboring cities had to come into Megale because they have been displaced fleeing the war. So it was kind of very difficult for the city to provide all the necessary resources and basic amenities for these fleeing communities. As it is, the city had its own water shortage, and all the other infrastructures were pretty much overstretched. So it was quite challenging for the city to provide all the necessary services for the ever-increasing displaced communities. So we had to combine remote sensing and participatory mapping to identify what exactly is the reality as far as food security is concerned, water scarcity, deteriorating sanitation, disrupted education, and weakened security and livelihood. So that the approach we followed has indeed helped us identify what exactly these challenges are, and how the community is trying to challenge all the challenges they are experiencing. So I think it was quite inspiring to look at the problems in terms of the methodology we have employed. So the study finally recommended to target interventions including economic reconstruction, educational support, water and sanitation infrastructure, healthcare and housing improvements, and protection for vulnerable groups. Because from the interviews we had with the communities and from the remote sensing data we acquired, we were able to see that all of the issues mentioned under the recommendation were pretty much challenged. So unless these things are improved, then it will be very difficult for the people to even survive in such a challenging circumstance. So from the findings of our study, now I will take you back to the debates on nature-based versus infrastructure-driven approach as ways of mitigating challenge. My question to everyone is, For example, what if the infrastructure is very much compromised and nature-based solutions are difficult to find, like in the context that I tried to explain, in the context where the city is under siege and all services were compromised, and land is not a possibility like the previous presentation, where people can have access to do gardening at least. And water is very scarce. There are only limited ponds and alternative water sources. So it's quite challenging to survive in such circumstance. So does it mean that there should not be other ways of developing resilience? And I'm trying to justify we should not limit to the definitions presented under nature-based and infrastructure-driven approach, because from what the people who talked to us told us, I think there are other alternatives as well, where people like in cities like in Mekelle manage to survive. For example, it's very difficult to tell how one or the other approach applies in areas where infrastructure is damaged, because the water system was damaged, and we cannot think of, the infrastructure-based services to provide the necessary facility for these communities. Sanitation facilities were also not in place, and houses, either some of them were damaged or people had to flee their houses and live in IDP camps because of fear of being targeted. IDP camps are not adequate to house the displaced, so they had to move to schools, because almost all the schools had to house, the displaced communities. So these kinds of surviving strategies, well, I am not sure if we can put them under one or the other. So there is a fragmented coordination between responsible governments and NGOs at the same time, which also adds into the challenge that I was mentioning. And public services are already strained: hygiene, water access, health education. So in such a context, it's very difficult to think of either nature-based or infrastructure-driven approach as alternatives to address the problems. So observations and experiences. Well, the host communities and IDPs have widely been employing other survival strategies, which I think are not completely addressed under the things we have been mentioning. For example, selling productive assets. Is it nature-based? I am not sure, but we can raise the issue under the discussion. People had to start petty trade in the streets because there is no any other way of surviving. So they can't get their salaries, they can't get access to the savings in the banks. So they had to do this, and relying on aid, relying on remittance. These were the strategies that people were completely relying on to survive. So that's another thing that we should consider as well. But more importantly, the support from community members provided to one another helped them become stronger in the face of unimaginable challenge. So what is not addressed in the debates under the nature-based versus infrastructure-driven resilience is that communities need other communities to listen to their stories, to provide them comfort. And that was how they told us they were able to survive all the challenges, because it was very difficult to live in such circumstance. So even the psychological support that they were getting from neighbors was very much important in supporting them survive in the challenge. So that's what has to be taken into account. So just resilience is not about getting access to either to nature-based or infrastructure-driven. It's about, we have to look at it in terms of other alternatives as well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zinawi. This is also another case that highlights the complexity of the challenge that we are talking about today. But what I can reflect from what you said is that community-to-community learning is something that happens naturally and can also highlight and also strengthen the resilience of these communities under fragile and conflict affected situations. So thank you so much for sharing this experience with us. Our final speaker is Dr. Mitchell Maktub, who will take us through a successful case of implementing hybrid gray and green solutions and how to sustain them over time. So, Dr. Maktub, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I'll just bring up my screen. Okay, you can see my screen, okay. Righty. Right, so I come to the discussion as both an applied researcher and a practitioner. My PhD was in water and environmental engineering, and my professional journey has taken me from 5 years in Iraq to working with IWMI in Ethiopia on water research in fragile settings, both in the Somali region and the region of Tigray. So this dual perspective allows me to bridge both the academic and practical worlds. I believe, as our colleague had said in the first Tasneem had said, that it's important to come into this as a practitioner and as well as a researcher. And so this vantage point has, and I believe is very relevant today, because green and gray infrastructure solutions only function, in my opinion, and I'm sure many of you might share the same, when we recognize their position at the intersection of the biophysical, the engineered, and the social. So I'm going to present here a case study as to providing an insight into how in displacement cases, populations move and how we see displacement settlements be constructed under a very rapid timeline. And this has an influence on the designs that are adopted for those camps and the ability to implement, both successfully gray as a standalone infrastructure or hybrid or green infrastructure. And there's important elements to consider in this sort of space. And I'm going to give you a bit of a backdrop, drawing on the case of Iraq in particular, starting with two cases. The first being the displacement post the subjugation of the city of Mosul during the time when ISIS had taken the city in the north. And then I'm going to present, and of course, the displacement into camps in the south of the city, an area called Kayara. And then I will go through a case study based on what good green-gray or gray-green infrastructure, hybrid infrastructure may look like in a displacement camp setting. So, right, let me just drop this down. There we are. Okay, so in conflict zones, many find themselves in a state of survival. Mosul was is still Iraq's second largest city, with a population of around 2 million, a very diverse population group there. And of course, many of you will have known and may have followed the conflict that was going on at that time, where an offensive took place between coalition forces moving individuals out of the city, as well as also coordinated with the humanitarian actors to basically drive ISIS out of the city. And you can see in the image here, the west being severely damaged, and the east is where coalition forces mobilized to move across the city. There was as I say, population of about 2 million. And one thing to bear in mind once the conflict arose is that in situations or armed conflict environments where we see displaced individuals, it's important to understand what happens at this point. One of the key elements here is that many find themselves, of course, displaced. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. But to give you a backdrop, they often lose their livelihood assets, often immediately. So natural assets, institutional assets, so that's access to their bank accounts, access to formal institutions that maybe are their support network, social assets, so they're maybe family members and friends, just to name a few. And in particular, physical assets are often sold off as a survival mechanism. But this is the most immediate impact. And one of the key immediate impacts is felt in access to water, then food. And there is a rule of 3, many of you may know: 3 minutes of air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. And a lot of the time in armed conflict zones, water infrastructure is often either targeted. You'll hear that, of course, a lot, and often it's it's sort of a victim, so to speak, of that conflict. And in particular, in Mosul, the bridges saw basically water infrastructure. 60% of the public infrastructure, rather, was destroyed, and bridges were destroyed as part of a means to cutting off Daesh in one side of the city on the west, and this cut overnight a population of about 650,000 individuals from water. And so this is, you can see sort of the drivers for displacement. And so what ends up happening is you have a very large movement of individuals who, in that state of survival, are displaced and are being moved by humanitarian actors, also by coalition forces, out of the city for their protection. And therefore, you have these camps set up, often in a very sort of emergency, in a state of emergency, and they're built in that state too. I'm just going to skip ahead. So often you'll see infrastructure being destroyed here, water trucking taking place in the cities. This was in particular in Mosul, and then obviously this is part of the response in the city, but individuals are displaced because within such a short period of time, they're having to move out to where the humanitarian or camp coordination and camp management have established camps. And in one particular case I'm going to show is the case of Kayara camp, and this was sort of a similar picture that you saw in a number of the other camps. So there were around Kayara, there were approximately 100,000 individuals displaced in and amongst a number of different camps, Hajali, Gayara, and Jeddah. And many of these camps experienced localized flooding. A lot of the camps are constructed in flood zones. So actually, Kayara, one of the Jeddah, part of it was constructed in a flood zone. And so there's there's a land ownership element here. There's also a site selection element here when you come to looking at camp construction. And camps are often, especially when we're looking at IDP camps that are supporting displacement from armed conflict, are constructed at sort of the drumbeat of act first, improve later. And that's very important because you often see retrofitting happening. So this is the same camp, which had experienced flooding. So 2016, 2017 is where it was going through its construction phase. By 2018, it was experiencing quite extensive flooding. So individuals being displaced from within camps. So surface water management becomes very pertinent. So when we look at grey infrastructure, it's important to understand that humanitarian actors are working within a very tight time frame. They're working on design, basically schematics that are just templates, and therefore they follow this, and sometimes it's not necessarily fully contextualized, and therefore you end up with situations like this. So there is an opportunity at the policy level to make inroads to help to inform how better to construct these camps. Now, it's important that we recognize the sort of timeline of these camps. Often we consider them to be temporary. Many of the individuals in camps like this existed in them for up to at least 2 years, most of them onwards up to about 4 years. These are IDP camps in environments that drop below 0 and go up to temperatures of 50 degrees Celsius. So you've got to sort of think about a whole range of variables that play into the design elements that you come to deploy. And also you've got to think about camp deconstruction, decommissioning. And this is the case of IDP camps. So here you can see this is in Kayara, one of the sort of retrofit examples for surface water management, at least. This now was fluvial stormwater measures. We're looking at constructing berms. And, you're often working with quite limited resources, both financially as well as what physical resources and assets you're able to draw on. And therefore, there's a lot of, as I say, variables that have to be considered during that construction phase. And it's important to do this at the start. So what can good green hybrid infrastructure look like in refugee camp settings for surface water management? So I'm drawing on some of my work from actually my PhD, and what we've done is look at constructing basically a resilient nature-based water solution in a refugee camp in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. And this sort of started in 2017. A lot of the individuals who are, in fact, most of the individuals here are Syrian refugees who'd been displaced in 2017. This camp in particular was constructed in 2013 and was starting to receive individuals by the end of that year, 2014. So a very important element is in engaging at both at the macro level, the meso, so practitioners, so UN agencies, cluster coordinators, so from the WASH cluster coordinators. Here we've got a camp manager. This is from the CCCM. And the camp coordination and camp management, and you're trying to draw in perspectives, and you're also trying to buy in, or you're buying in ownership. You're helping them come up with the solutions, but also consider experiences from a variety of different contexts to be able to drive that evidence base to inform your designs, as well as the robustness of your research. And then, of course, at the micro level, the community you have to work well within the humanitarian architecture at the same time as getting the community to co-design and also be trained on the systems that you're going to be installing in the camps. So here's a good example of that being undertaken, where the community were informed by being provided certain designs and trained on nature-based solutions, and SUDS in particular, which is sort of an engineered or hybrid management train for both pluvial, mostly pluvial, storm and surface water, and then of course involving them through, as I say, the humanitarian architecture. So in this case, adopting the emergency livelihoods cluster, standing operating procedures. So we used the cash for work standard minimum expenditure basket. So each individual was receiving, say, approximately $25 to $20. And then at the end, an individual was, through a skill set selection process, was identified as possessing the skills to maintain the site. And we worked with both the camp designers, UNHCR, CCCM, shelter clusters, to basically produce a design, which went through a designer, myself, on some of the soft and hard engineering elements. And then we went into the actual designs themselves, some of which are seen here. So a conveyance swale to basically interact with trickle trenches and tree pits to attenuate, but also to treat water as it moved out of the camp space. So a fail swale coming out of the camp, where you're managing larger water flows, and then a number of escape channels. So Here's another example of individuals being involved in the process. So the individual here with the red headscarf, he was actually the individual selected to manage the site. And this is part of an integrated pluvial grey water management system for a refugee camp. So just to put in perspective that it's important to involve all levels, macro, meso, and micro. Meso in particular, because you have the opportunity to take the knowledge and carry this forward into other settings. So in this case, it was cited as a good practice within international guidance documents, including Arab's work, the ETH, GTH, Geneva Technical Hubs, UNHCR's Flood Risk in Humanitarian Settlements Compendium, as well as IOM's Site Improvement Catalog, which was deployed in Cox's Bazar. So what did it actually look like in a timeline? So here's some historical imagery. You see the camp being populated as well as constructed. Then by 2017, I'll just stop there. Now the camp has been, the system has been constructed and the green infrastructure is growing and being managed and maintained. As I say, we provided materials through in-kind grants to an individual who lived in this specific plot to manage the site, which was end of pipe, but also integrated. And you'll see here, so this is March 2020. And so here's a very good example, a satellite image of the system that's integrated within these grey water channels, which also manage stormwater. And this system is, you're looking at about, 100 meters across there. And what we then done with the in-kind grants is also to support with so part of stabilization agriculture here. So that was embedded into this, as well as small ruminants and poultry as part of that integrated system within this camp setting. And I think every setting is contextualized. So this was an example. And of course, you've got to manage temperatures varying between 0 to 50 degrees. And so you've got to have a system that captures water along a management train. So it starts at source. So households working together to collect water to ensure that these systems continue to operate during changes in the biophysical environment. So I'd like to stop there, and I hope this case example has been useful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to reach out, please feel free to do so. Thank you. Back to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Maktaf. This is very interesting case where hybrid solutions are deployed, and also you highlighted that under humanitarian crisis, we always act under this idea of act now and improve later. But you showed clearly that participating and also engaging stakeholders can sustain the solutions and also make sure that the solution is appropriate and effective for tackling these challenge that we are facing. So thank you so much for sharing this case with us. We are running a bit short of time, but let me now guide you to an interactive session that we prepared for you, for our respected audience. We created a Mentimeter with 4 questions that we would like to have your reflection on. So I will put the link in the chat. So please, if you can go to that specific website, I will share also my slide here on my screen. Let me just go to Mentimeter here. Okay, can you see the Mentimeter, right? So
Yeah,
if you
we
can,
do.
thank you. If you can please go to this link, and we will go through four quick questions just to get your reflections, your insights from your experiences. So if you are now there, the first question is, if you could implement one intervention tomorrow in your city, what would it be? Is it something related to flood protection, something related to green spaces, tree planting, safe water supply, food gardens, or waste management? You can choose one of these options. I see some results coming. So green spaces, tree planting, safe water supply, waste management, getting similar attention. Then flood protection, gaining less attention. Okay, waste management now, outstanding. I will just give some of you seconds to enable our colleagues who did not respond to do so. Okay, great. Then I will move to the second question. The second question is, who should participate in the co-design process? If we agree that co-designing is a key for effectiveness and sustainability of the solutions that we would like to implement, this is an open-ended question. So if you would like to just give us the names of the participants or stakeholders you think should be participating in the co-design process. Is it communities, community representatives, governments? Community again, users, scientific experts, faith leaders, everyone with a stake, meso level, micro level, women, policymakers, youth. Yes, that's absolutely important. Okay, perfect. This gives us some impressions about who should be involved. So it is everyone, almost everyone. Okay, let us go to the third question. Our third question is, in informal or displacement settings, which trade-offs most affect climate resilience? Is it green versus gray solutions, or short-term relief versus long-term resilience, infrastructure versus community-led action, or cost versus inclusiveness? So far, it seems that the trade-offs between the short-term relief versus long-term resilience is outstanding here as the main trade-off. And then infrastructure versus community-led action. Okay, I will move to the fourth question, the last one. In your opinion, what is the biggest barrier to inclusive urban climate action in fragile setting? Is it weak governance and institutions, limited funding, lack community participation, poor coordination among actors, or data and knowledge gap? Okay, from your responses, I see that poor coordination among actors can be the biggest barrier here, followed by weak governance and institutions. Okay, that's very helpful to get your insights on this. So thank you so much for your thoughtful engagement in this activity. And also thank you to our speakers for sharing their experiences. I'm afraid that we will not have time to take questions, but I will hand over to my colleague, Dr. Sandra, to wrap up today's discussion and give us her insights. Thank you. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. And I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. This was really inspiring discussion. I always appreciate having these opportunities to pause and to listen to the experiences that everyone here has shared with us today. So I'll keep this brief, but I think I just want to point out one of the things that really hooked me today, let's say, is that we came here to talk about green and gray solutions. That's what it said on our invitation, right? But what's emerged from this discussion as being a really rich area to continue our discussion, and I encourage everybody to continue to share their questions through the chat, through emails, remain engaged with us online on our social platforms, and so on. The thing that's emerged from this for me is the social story, right? How communities organize, innovate, and support one another in the midst of a crisis. I work on nature-based solutions projects here with some colleagues here who are here in this session. And the fact that we're talking about NBS as a pathway for community building, for social cohesion, for peace building, is enlightening. It is inspiring. And I think it's a dimension that requires more investigation if this really is truly, like Dr. Zenawi was talking about, the social emotional components of these types of interventions or community engagements. If we can capitalize on that social emotional component of working together on NBS for survival, for recovery, for resilience, this just seems to be a lot of untapped potential. When we switch out of crisis, how much time do we spend reflecting on those lessons of that inspiration of how people were moved to do what they did to cope? And I hope that this is the start of a conversation to capture those kinds of lessons. I know as a researcher, this is something I don't think we've documented very well to apply to future practice in future crises. So these insights really do, we learn a lot about locally driven action through this discussion. This actually is a good segue to our session next week, which I hope you will consider joining us for, which will be on the 2nd of October at 12 p.m. Central European Time. That discussion will be on enabling locally driven and gender inclusive climate adaptation through humanitarian interventions and in humanitarian settings. So very much related to this discussion we had today, but more broadly engaging on some new geographies and also with the humanitarian community on these discussions. So thanks very much for taking the time today. Thank you, Mohammed, for bringing us all together. I wish everybody here the very best for the rest of their day, and I will stop there. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.